Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. Welcome to the new sponsored training, part 2. And again, my name is Bobby Beach, School Nutrition Specialist. And a couple housekeeping items. Again, this meeting is being recorded. We ask you to please mute yourself during the presentation. There will be the same question and answer section at the end. So if you have any questions as I'm going through the presentation, please utilize the chat function so we can record any questions you may have during the presentation. And if you wanted to apply some background effects or raise your hand, you can click on the 3 little dots as you hover over the screen. We'll give you that option. The agenda for today, I'm going to cover Performance Standard 2, and this is all your meal pattern and nutritional quality. So we'll talk about the meal pattern, menu production records, and what makes a reimbursable meal. I will also be covering the general areas, which you can see is a long list of all the other requirements incorporated into the National School Lunch Program. So we'll talk about civil rights, on-site monitoring, local school wellness policy, smart snacks, professional standards, water availability, food safety reporting and record keeping, and school breakfast program outreach. So we'll start with Performance Standard 2, the meal pattern and nutritional quality. So the meal pattern is signing up for School Food Authority or SFA. You must follow the meal pattern requirements for each 8th grade group within all your reimbursable meal service lines. And this is in federal regulation in 210 for the school lunch program and 220 for school breakfast. So the required components for lunch, as you can see, you must offer a meat alternate, grain, fruit, vegetables, and fluid milk. For breakfast, it's a little bit different, and you're only required to offer a grain, fruit, and fluid milk. If you wish to offer a meat alternate or a vegetable, that is an option for you under breakfast, but is not required. And each age grade group will have minimum daily and weekly requirements for the portion size, calories, sodium, and trans fat. And I've included a chart here on the lunch meal pattern requirements. In parentheses, you'll see this is the minimum amount that you must offer each day. And then the larger amount is what you have to offer over the week. So it's going to vary by age grade group. For fruits, vegetables, under the lunch program, you also have to meet the vegetable subgroups. So although that you have to offer 3 1/4 cup to 5 cups over the week, there are different amounts you have to offer of dark green vegetables, red, orange, legumes, starchy, and other vegetables. And for the lunch meal pattern, you also have to meet grains, meat alternates, and fluid milk cups. There's daily and weekly requirements. Grains and meat alternates are measured in ounce equivalents. So if you're unsure how that is met, you can always look at the child nutrition label or use the food buying guide to determine what ounce equivalent counts for each food item. Some other specifications you have to worry about are calories, saturated fat, sodium, and trans fat. For breakfast, as I mentioned before, only fruits, grains, and milks must be offered. And again, the ounces and meat alternates are going to be measured in an ounce equivalent. Fluid milk, you must offer 1 cup of fluid milk a day for breakfast and for lunch. This is for all age grade groups. And it will also have calories, saturated fat, sodium, and trans fat requirements. Some additional requirements you'll have to worry about for all grains offered and are credited to the meal pattern, they must be whole grain rich. So this means that any grain product must be made of 51% whole grains. And to identify these items, if you're looking at the food label, the first ingredient listed should be whole grain, whole corn, or whole oats. And that would be a quick way to tell if that item is whole grain rich. For milk, you must offer 2 milk fat options during breakfast and lunch. So you can offer a fat-free or 1% unflavored milk or a fat-free flavored milk. And all juice served must be 100% juice. So for menu requirements or menu compliance, it is your responsibility as a school food authority or SFA to follow the menu and identify the minimum quantities weekly and daily are being met, even if you're using a meal vendor. So if you are using a meal vendor, you are they are outsourcing, they're planning your menu and delivering, or you're picking up those food items. However, you must verify that your vendor is following that contract and meeting the meal pattern for your age grade group. If you are noticing on a daily level or a weekly level, you're suspicious that these quantities are not being met, you can always ask for the menu certification worksheets from your vendors to ensure that they are in compliance. Substitutions are allowable for your planned menu. If substitutions are made, you must document it on your menu and in your menu production records, so you can record what was being replaced and what was substituted on the original menu. And even if substitutions are made, you are still responsible for meeting those daily and weekly requirements. So for example, if you were planned to serve a baked bean for today, and for some reason that item was not available, you can substitute another vegetable, which would meet your daily requirements of serving that 3/4 cup vegetable. However, you must offer another legume later in the week to meet that legume requirement for those vegetable subgroups. So your menu production records. Now this is your receipt that you planned, prepared, and served enough of each component to verify the number of meals that you claimed. There are 12 items that are required to be on a menu production record. The first is the date and the site name. You should list all your menu or food items served. You have to identify if you are using offer versus serve and a yes or no box. You must list any recipes or products used for your menu items, the age grade group of students, so the meal pattern that you're following, the portion sizes for all your menu items and how they contribute to the meal pattern, the total number of servings you planned or projected to serve, the amount of food you actually used or prepared, the number of servings you served, leftovers, condiments, or extras. So if you are using a meal vendor, these first 9 items, besides the date and the time, which could be provided from the vendor or the sponsor, these first 9 are going to be provided from the vendor because they're actually preparing the food. So they're going to know the menu, they're going to know the age grade group they prepared for, the portion sizes, how it is supposed to contribute to the meal pattern, and the amount of food used. The sponsor should be recording the number of servings actually served, the leftovers, and how many condiments and extras were served. Here's an example of a menu production record. This is an NDA template, and you can see here that incorporates all 12 requirements that I listed earlier. I've included several templates and resources in the meeting invitation. So if you need an example of some menu production records, you can visit those to see if they work for your program. And on this slide, I wanted to include some menu planning resources, which they could be used if you have a vendor or if you're doing a self-operated program. The United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, has several resources. The first link is to the child nutrition labeling. This is a great resource if you have questions on any product that you're serving. You can look up the child nutrition label to see how many ounce equivalents that product is meeting to credit to your meal pattern. The next link is a food buying guide. So if you have any questions or not sure how many cups are in a certain size apple or in a number 10 can, how many half-cup servings of fruit would be in that number 10 can, this gives you resources to help you menu plan and how to credit those products. And the last link provides some recipes that they've created, which breaks down how that menu is credited to meet those minimum and weekly requirements. The Institute of Child Nutrition also has a host of information for menu planning, and the Lunchbox Chef Ann Foundation. In the meeting invitation, you will find the menu production record workbook from NDA, and this is intended to be a self-guided workbook that will walk you through the requirements of the menu production record, some exercises, audit techniques to make sure that what you're recording is truly reflecting what you served for the day and is verifying the number of meals that you served and are claiming for that day. So next thing I want to talk about is reimbursable meals. And reimbursable meals is referring to a meal in which all the required components were taken by a student to actually claim that meal. And for a reimbursable meal, even though they're taking the required components, those components must be in the minimum quantity to be counted as reimbursable. And if you are using service stations or several different lines, breakfast in the classroom, lunch in the classroom, the students must have access to all the required components to make up a reimbursable meal. So there's two different options you can choose to make up those reimbursable meals. The first is straight serve, and this means that all students are receiving all components of the meal to be reimbursable. So for lunch, the students must receive in the minimum quantity a meat alternate, grain, fruit, vegetable, and fluid milk. And for breakfast, they must receive a grain, fruit, and milk. If you're choosing offer versus serve, this menu planning concept allows students to decline portions of the meal offered or the components offered, but still make up a reimbursable meal so you can claim. And the whole goal of offer versus serve is to reduce waste and give students some choice to the foods that they actually want to eat, so they're not having to take every single menu item offered for that day. And offer versus serve does have the potential to keep food costs at a minimum for your school lunch program. So under offer versus serve for lunch, you must offer all 5 components at lunch, and students must select 3 of the 5 components, one being a fruit or vegetable, to still be counted as a reimbursable meal. And the key word here in offer versus serve for lunch is components. So the students must take 3 components. So if a student comes up with a hamburger and a half a cup of broccoli, even though they only have 2 items, they have 3 components, with the hamburger being a meat alternate and a grain, and still getting that required the half a cup fruit or vegetable. And these may even be one item depending on the menu you're serving. So if you're offering a beef and broccoli bowl that includes your meat alternate, your grain with the rice, and broccoli, it's only one item, but they're still getting all three components. So they would not be required to take anything else. And it's not required that students get a milk every day. That's optional under offer versus serve. And again, if you're using multiple food service lines, you must have all 5 components available for students to choose so they can select enough components to be a reimbursable meal. In senior high school, so 9th through 12th grade, this is required for lunch. So for breakfast, you always have the option. Under lunch, 9th through 12th grades are required to do offer versus serve. There is a current nationwide waiver from USDA for this requirement, but we'll discuss that on Monday when we go over the several different waivers available for you to elect into. Now for offer versus serve for breakfast, it's a little different. So again, it's an option for all age grade groups, so it is a decision that's at your discretion. And the breakfast, the key word is items. You must offer 4 items under an offer versus serve breakfast, and the students must take 3 food items, with 1 being a half a cup of fruit or vegetable if you're offering vegetable in your breakfast service. So the key there is they still have to take 3 food items. So even if you did serve pancakes that are counting as 2 grains, they still must take 2 other food items to be considered a reimbursable meal. For signage, menus must be made available daily to students. And there should be signage even if you're doing straight serve or offer versus serve, so students know what they must take to make up that reimbursable meal. So if you're doing a straight serve breakfast or lunch, you'll identify that they have to take every menu item offered, all components, to be considered reimbursable. And if you're doing offer versus serve, you're going to have signage that indicates that you only have to take 3 items at breakfast and 3 components at lunch. And if you need examples of some menu signage, you can always contact me and I can provide you some examples, both from USDA and some from other SFAs within Nevada. So now I'm going to move on to the general areas. And again, this covers civil rights, on-site monitoring, your local school wellness policy and smart snacks, professional standards, water availability, food safety, storage, and Buy American, reporting and record keeping, and school breakfast outreach. Civil rights. To be compliant with civil rights requirement, first you must have an annual civil rights log. And this is a log that you'll keep even if it's blank year after year, so you can record the number of civil rights complaints you've had for your school meal program. And the next thing you'll create is a civil rights policy, and this is a procedure document where you'll outline all the procedures if you had a civil rights complaint. So if someone came up to a complaint, this is how you would handle that civil rights complaint. There's an also annual training requirement. All staff who interact with program participants, so this includes staff members only tasked with processing applications, staff that are serving the school meals, they all must receive an annual USDA civil rights training. And you may find this in CNP under our resources section. The next requirement is that an Injustice for All poster must be visible in the meal service area to your program participants. For meals served in the classroom, whether it's lunch or breakfast, this requirement is exempt. It must be in a location where program participants have access to this information. So next I wanted to talk about the USDA non-discrimination statement. It is required that you put this statement on all your program materials, and this includes any documents, pamphlets, brochures, and websites for public information or public dissemination. If your materials do not allow the entire civil rights or the entire non-discrimination statement to fit on your program materials and still be legible, you may use the shorter version, which is this institution is an equal opportunity provider. And the full statement can be found at the link below on this website. On-site monitoring. On-site monitoring is to be done by the school food authority, and this is your own edit check of your program to make sure you're meeting all the program requirements. If you do have only one site participating, it is exempt, but we still recommend, because again, like I said earlier, this is your self-check to make sure that you are meeting all program requirements. For the lunch program, if any of your sites are operating the lunch program, this must be done annually. And you're going to look at counting and claiming system and the general program areas as you're on site reviewing their meal service. If you have sites participating in breakfast, they must be monitored as above, so you're still looking at counting and claiming in the general program areas. However, they can be completed once every 2 years. So this could be all sites reviewed every other year or 50% of the sites reviewed over the 2 years, as long as that site is getting an on-site monitoring review once every 2 years. This must be completed by February 1st of each program year, and there is an NDA template available. Next, I'm going to pass it to Bailey to talk about the local school wellness policy and smart snacks.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. So I am the new student wellness coordinator for the state of Nevada. Many of you may already be familiar with student wellness as part of our school meal programs. To give you a little bit of background review, as part of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act in 2010, the wellness requirements were implemented as part of the school meals programs and are reviewed as part of the administrative portion of the oversight of the school meal programs. Every state is required to have their own individual school wellness policy, and Nevada's is available on the NDA website for anyone to access. And we also have a best practices manual that you may find very useful as well. In addition to having a state wellness policy, as part of the requirements to become a school meal operator in the state of Nevada, every SFA is required to create their own. And we do verify this every year when you reapply to be a school meal operator in the state of Nevada. The school wellness policy generally gives oversight to any foods that are either sold outside of the school meals programs or given away on campus. The definition of a school day, according to the wellness policy, not just in Nevada, but according to federal guidelines, is any time from midnight to half an hour after the official end of the school day, every day. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of the USDA requirements that every state is expected to follow and implement. As mentioned before, each state is required to outline all of these policies in their application for the school meal program at the beginning of each year. One of the requirements is there needs to be a assigned wellness policy advisory group, and a lot of the details on all of these components are outlined further in the policy themselves. So if you'd like to know more details about this, you can either contact me or you can access the policy on our website. All SFAs must give annual public notification to their community on the wellness policy within their local education agency, when they plan to meet as an advisory group, and the information on that so that people from their community can attend if they choose. Also, our sponsors are required to identify goals in 3 different areas. One is nutrition, promotion, and education. The other is physical activity. And then the third is a little bit more ambiguous. It is other school-based activities that promote wellness. Oftentimes this takes the form of a health fair or promotion of other medical or health advisements, such as vaccinations or just general health advisories. There would be a lot actually regarding COVID this year. So those are generally pretty open-ended. Every Nevada sponsor is required to identify the specifics of their goals for their LEA at the beginning of each year. Some other requirements include nutrition guidelines for all foods and beverages that are sold outside of the school meals programs, as I mentioned before. And many of you are already familiar with the Smart Snacks Nutrition Standards, or SSNS. And those are nationwide standards. They're not unique to Nevada. And many sponsors have been able to successfully implement this within their LEA. We do get sometimes a lot of inquiries regarding fundraising and how to still successfully do that while meeting the Smart Snacks nutrition standards. There's a ton of resources available online for that, and if you would like more information, you can always reach out to us for some of the information that we have available. Our sponsors are also required to follow the guidelines regarding marketing and advertising of foods that are made available to students during the school day. Again, they have to meet the Smart Snacks nutrition standards. And then the federal guideline is that all of our sponsors have to complete a triennial, or once every 3 years, assessment of their local wellness policy. We'll go over a little bit more in detail, but the Nevada requirement for this is actually once a year, not once every 3 years. So to go into a little bit more details on the specific Nevada requirements, when Nevada implemented this 8 years ago, they decided, with the help of advisory committees statewide, that they would also implement these stricter standards for our state. One is no carbonated beverages, whether they meet the sugar and calorie requirements of the SSNS or not. They would not be allowed to be sold or given to students on campus during the school day. Students must have an opportunity to have 30 minutes of physical activity during the school day. There's a little bit of flexibility around this, but also some guidelines as to whether this would be broken up into 15-minute sessions before and after lunch, or whether this would include 30 minutes before lunch and 30 minutes after lunch. So if anyone is curious about some of those specifics, again, you can reach out to one of us at NDA. Nevada meal consumption times requirements are 15 minutes for breakfast and at least 20 minutes for lunch. If any of our new sponsors are more familiar with these requirements in other states, you might have experienced a little bit stricter requirements for these, but these are the standards for Nevada. And then finally, as I mentioned previously, all sponsors are actually required to do an annual policy implementation assessment rather than just once every 3 years, as the federal guidelines require. Next slide, please. So to go into a little bit more specifics on the Smart Snacks nutrition standards, and again, some of you may already be very familiar with these. There are requirements that all foods that are either given away or sold to students outside of the school food authority or the school meals programs, anytime during the school day on campus, they must meet all of these requirements. And they're somewhat similar to the requirements for the meals, but they're not as strict. They have a little bit more flexibility, and that's to meet cultural foods, standards and expectations, and also fundraising allowabilities that people are used to. So it gives just a tiny bit more flexibility, but also has a high standard for maintaining and promoting health and wellness for students. So the standards include restrictions for calories, fat, saturated fat, trans fat, sodium, and sugar. So those are kind of the 5 categories. Like I said, similar to the meal programs requirements. Next slide, please. So beverages is a category of the SSNS that is a little bit variable. It actually differs by grade level. However, like I mentioned, all beverages in Nevada that are either sold or given away to students must be non-carbonated. Caffeine is a little bit flexible, and this has actually kind of gone back and forth historically over the years. But ultimately, we allow the flexibility for the district or local education agency to make this decision. And then finally, there absolutely cannot be any restriction on the sale of allowable beverages at any grade level during the school day. So that would include things like water or juice. So, and excuse me, also including milk. So students must have the ability to purchase those things alongside other meal programs at any time during the school day. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it for wellness. Thank you all very much. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions on wellness.
Thanks, Bailey. And now I'm going to move on to professional standards. There are several requirements for professional standards. The first are hiring standards for any of your school nutrition directors hired on or after July 1st, 2015. So, and since you all are new sponsors, this would apply to any program staff that are considered a director in your school food authority. So depending on the size of your SFA, so the number of students at your school sites, will depend the level of education and the numbers of years of school nutrition program experience they must have to be a director. For all directors, it is required to have an 8-hour food safety training, and this may be completed 5 years prior to the date of hire or within 30 operating days of your hire. The link below will take you to the Professional Standards website, and I've included a couple flyers that will walk you through the requirements for your school nutrition director in this meeting invitation. The next are annual training standards. So all of your staff that interact with your program participants are required to have a number of professional standards annual training. And training should be specific to the job your food service staff is doing. And it's intended to help them help your employees perform their duties well. Annual training requirements: if you are director, you're required to complete 12 hours a year. Managers are required to complete 10. Any other full-time program staff should complete at least 6 hours, and anyone working less than 28 hours a week should be completing 4 hours a year. You're also required to track the number of hours that your employees are taking annually. You may use the USDA tracking tool, and on the slide you'll find a link to that, or you can create your own tracking tool, as long as it includes the following fields. You must include the name of the staff person, the date they were hired, their title or their position title, the number of hours they're required to take over the year, the training title and subject for all training that they've taken over the year, and the date, the length of the training, the school year the training is applied to, so where do you want to code those hours to what school year, and there must be a running total of the completed hours to date. And you'll also see in the chat function with all the resources I upload, there's a couple of different templates that some of our other SFAs have created and are willing to share. So they are in, both of them are in Excel, and they're designed a little differently. So if you find that this works for your program staff, you're more than welcome to use those templates. So next I'm going to talk about water availability. Free potable water must be made available to your program participants during the meal services in your meal service location. And the only exception to this is if you're doing breakfast in the classroom. If you're doing lunch in the classroom, it is still required that you offer potable water to your students. Food safety, storage, and Buy American. So for food safety and storage, each operating site must have an up-to-date food safety or HACCP manual that has an accurate table of contents and is specific to each school site. So for those of you using a meal vendor and are not preparing meals on site, you wouldn't include standard operating procedures for cooking certain standardized recipes or cooling those products. You want it to be site specific. You also must receive 2 food safety inspections a year. If you do not receive 2 a year, you need to keep documentation that you've requested from your local health department. Daily, you must maintain temperature and sanitation logs. And for storage, you must store all your food products with proper storage techniques and using the first in, first out storage method. For Buy American, any school food authority in the United States must purchase domestic agriculture commodities and food products, and this is to the maximum extent possible. There are going to be items that you must procure that are not produced in the United States, but you must keep documentation of why you're purchasing those alternate items that are not produced in the United States, whether it be an expense or they're unavailable to procure from the United States. Reporting and record keeping. So you must keep all records for the program 3 years plus the current school year. And this includes all documentation related to the program. So any permanent agreements, your free and reduced lunch policy statements, any applications received, all your claim documentation, your menu certifications, and your menu production records. For reporting, there's going to be several reports that you'll have to complete throughout the year. The first one coming up due on November 10th is your October free and reduced lunch data. And we do send reminders of all of these reports throughout the year and some templates if that is applicable. Your October data, if you're using Infinite Campus, which we will provide instructions, you'll be pulling directly from that student information system and submitting to NDA. And these are all aggregate numbers and not individual student information. By November 15th, you must enter all the racial and ethnic data that was submitted on all your applications received into our CNP system. February 1st, you will also enter your verification information. So this is a summary of your verification activities. This is also collected in CNP. March 1st, you're going to report the number of on-site monitoring reviews you've conducted during the school year, and that's also in CNP. April 10th, you're going to submit your direct certification data. And this is an annual requirement, and it does assess if you are eligible to participate in CEP. So even if you don't intend to operate CEP, you still must submit this data annually by April 10th. June 1st, you're going to enter your health inspection and your civil rights information, which would be the date that you've trained all your staff, into CNP. And on June 30th, we will collect that annual school wellness policy implementation report. So school breakfast program and summer food service outreach. So it is required that you reach out to all eligible families, notifying them if you are operating a breakfast program. And it's important to remind them that even your lunch application that says free and that you're processing for a free and reduced lunch, any student that's eligible for lunch, free and reduced, can receive a free or reduced breakfast as well. And this would only be if you're offering a breakfast program. And then summer food service program, although this is outside of the National School Lunch Program, it is required that you do outreach before the end of the school year. So it does kind of cross the lines of the National School Lunch Program because it's during the school year. So if you do intend to operate the summer food service program, you're going to do some outreach for your students, letting them know that this will be available during the summertime. Now, does anyone have any questions? I see Jen had a question. You can get a copy of this PowerPoint, and I will share all of this with you. And please let me know, because this is my first time uploading so many documents into Teams. So if you don't have access to any of the information that I've uploaded, all the resources that you would have seen in the chat, I can always send via email if that's going to work better for you.
Hi, Bobby. This is Jennifer. I think you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, I did see some attachments to a Teams meeting the other day that worked, but I don't happen to see them on this Teams meeting.
Okay, and it looks like when I uploaded them, they uploaded all together and didn't separate out for the various days. So I'll go ahead and send everyone that was invited all the resources I included for each day, so you have access to those.
Okay. And I just have one question from the beginning still. So you said something about the daily dozen, and you have to count actual servings versus projected servings, and the vendor calculates the projected servings. We at the school level track actual servings. So I'm thinking of like a recipe, and then it comes out to a number of servings, and then back at the kitchen they're serving not only our school but another school. So I'm getting a little confused. And I guess what I really should focus on is when you say actual servings and leftovers, since ours are prepackaged meals, I just need to count the number of meals served and the number of leftover. Is that right?
Yes, so you will be counting that information, and from your vendor, since it's a little different than doing a self-operated program, your projected servings would be the number of servings that you ordered, or you projected that you're going to serve 100 each day, and this is the number of items your vendor provided to you. And then you're going to track, well, we actually say you projected 100, you ordered 100, you only served 80 servings, and you had 20 left over. So it's a little bit different for your vended meal, and it's more of the number of meals you projected to serve or ordered from that vendor for the day.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, and then you had a slide about monitoring and reporting. Yes. And I believe that there's a report that comes in the spring where we're supposed to report on our monitoring. Could you I didn't understand that piece. What should we be capturing now to be able to do the monitoring report in the spring?
Sure, absolutely. So the on-site monitoring, and I've also included a template, and I'll send this again later. So you're going to do any on-site monitoring activities before February 1st, and then starting March 1st, we request that report in CNP, and all it's asking for is the number of reviews that you did. So we'll ask you the number of lunch reviews. If you have, 4 sites, you did 4 reviews prior to February 1st, and we'll ask you the number of breakfast reviews. So if you didn't do any breakfast reviews this year because you were planning to do them next year, you would just enter 0. So it's only 2 fields that you're actually entering for that reporting information.
Okay, and when you say review though, you're just reviewing the policy, you're reviewing that your training is on track, you're reviewing that you're tracking properly, that kind of stuff?
It is. So it's more of a meal service observation, and it's on site. So we do have forms available that you can use, and you're going to be going on site to make sure your cashiers are correctly identifying those reimbursable meals, correctly counting the number of students made. You're going to look at their food safety, take a look in their kitchen. Is that school site following your wellness policy as you created for your annual application? So it will be all of those general areas, counting and claiming, and meal pattern requirements that apply specifically to that school site. And it's just your own edit check to make sure if we were to come out on a review, you're making sure that that site is following all the requirements as you intended.
Okay, thank you.
And are there any other questions? And not seeing any, I'm going to go ahead and end this meeting presentation. I'll go back through the chat both for yesterday and today to see if there were any questions that we didn't follow up with. And again, I will resend all of those resources that I attached for both yesterday and today's presentation. So I thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful Friday and a happy weekend. And we will see you all on Monday for the last part 3. Of this presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.